समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
This episode of First Person Second Draft comes to you, or it's justified, because it is the 32nd anniversary of one of the worst terror attacks in India's history. In fact, it was the worst by far until 26/11 came in 2008. So I'm taking you back to 1993, March 12, 1993. You would have figured by this time what happened then. That was the date of the serial bombings in Mumbai, and you can see the toll in those bombings on your screens. All the data is available. It's there. They've been inquiries, they've been commissions, and they've been books written about this. This was also brought back into our lives with the release of the film Sanju, on which I wrote a national interest because it irritated me so much that there was an effort to use the power of Bollywood to normalize everything and to paint Sanjay Dutt as a victim instead of a perpetrator, a criminal who got away very lightly in that story. And this is something that I had also written about. I had investigated it for India Today magazine in a very long story along with Masih Rahman, my colleague in Mumbai. So there's a fair bit of data, one in my memory, in my written material, written archive, and also with the benefit of hindsight, because after all, that is the spirit of first person second draft. Stories we covered live in detail when they were playing out, when they were unfolding, and then revisiting them in the course of time when we have more wisdom, because as time passes, more facts come out, and some of the things that you believed earlier turn out to be myths. Some of the others that you knew nothing about now surface and help you connect the strands or connect the threads so you get a better picture or fix the jigsaw. So that is what we do with first person second draft. And that's why on March 12, I record this one on the 32nd anniversary of the serial blasts in Mumbai in March 1993. Now, on one issue, there is no doubt. Since I mentioned Sanjay Dutt just now. On one issue, there is no doubt. The firearms given to Sanjay Dutt in the middle of January 1993 were indeed for self-defense. So what was anybody complaining about? He had firearms for self-defense. Self-defense is a good defense morally, as it is in a court of law. So where's the problem? The problem, as usual, lies in the detail, which must be stated once again now because we live in times of attention deficit disorder, ADD. Also, when the presumption seems to be that there was no history before Google. That's why first person second draft also. Or when you merely speed read history through Hindi cinema, as in the case of Black Friday, the stark Anurag Kashyap film based on the serial bombings of March 1993, or Sanju, which is a Vidhu Vinod Chopra, Rajkumar Hirani creation. It is, however, important to understand what happened before and after. Only then can you get a fuller picture of what India, and not merely Bombay. I'm deliberately using Bombay because it was then Bombay. What India then, and not merely Bombay, had been confronted with in those bloody months. I speak here partly with the benefit of hindsight, but mostly as somebody who covered the aftermath of the blasts for India Today magazine in the company of some of the finest reporters in the magazine's bureau. Then it's Bombay bureau chief, whose name I mentioned earlier, Masih Rahman, and Rahul Pathak. The most important fact is that while the serial bombing seemed like a flawless operation, like most things ISI does, it was also a strategic disaster, because the objective of its planners was not merely to kill a few hundred people, it was to orchestrate communal riots of an unthinkable intensity nobody would be able to control. It was the first ISI operation of this scale anywhere in India. In fact, It was then the first significant ISI mischief outside of Punjab and Kashmir in India. And remember, this is when militancy in Punjab was being rapidly crushed by KPS Gill's police, and the Kashmiri insurgency was still in its early, mostly indigenous phase. The key to understanding that plot lies in separating, analyzing, and sequencing three different sets of events. The first riots broke out on December 6, just as Babri Masjid fell, December 6, 1992. Angry Muslims hit the streets because of the Babri Masjid destruction. They were angry. Angry Muslims hit the streets first, and then they faced the full fury of the Shiv Sainiks and the rest. And a partisan Bombay police. Bombay police was on one side. That is the Shiv Sainik side. These riots settled by the third week of December. The second round began in the first week of January. But a few significant things had happened in the interim. First, a large consignment of arms, ammunition, and RDX. RDX was still new to India. RDX landed at a place called Dighi on the Konkan coast in the first week of January. I believe a port is being developed at Dighi now. Second, and most significant to me, was the fact that in the run-up to the second round of riots, the police had discovered an intriguing pattern. Several key officers I met, including M.N. Singh, the eminent Bombay police commissioner, several key officers I met then told me that bodies of poor Hindu Mathadis are headload workers from Maharashtra hinterland, were being found early mornings on street where they had often slept, slit at the throat with small knife as if in some ritualistic halal style. That was, however, an analytical afterthought as the investigators pieced the story together later. These bodies were mostly found around Dongri, a communally sensitive area. The conjecture was that someone was trying to provoke a second round of riots, that there was a plan to this. The armaments were being landed at the same time and were to be distributed again in sensitive areas. Sanjay Dutt got his consignment, for example, on 16th January 1993, that is almost 2 months before the bombing. So he got his consignment on 16th of January 1993 when the second round of riots was ebbing. So the batches of weapons distributed around this time were for self-defense, but not for self-defense during these riots. The riots had by now ended. The second consignment then landed at Shekhar again on Maharashtra coast, at Shekhar in the first week of February. There were no riots then. There were no riots in January. There were no riots in February. In fact, there was total, if uneasy, peace in Bombay until the bombings on 12th of March, 5 weeks later from the second landing. Focus on these dates and events and the picture becomes clearer. The Mathadis, who are large, poor but well-knit population, were killed ritually in communally sensitive areas to provoke fresh riots. Since the Shiv Sainiks were now well organized and helped along by a partisan police, this created greater justification for the serial bombings in retaliation and also inspired for the masterminds what the Supreme Court subsequently, confirming its conviction orders, described as the foot soldiers within the furious and insecure local Muslim population. The second round of riots was much more one-sided against the Muslims than the first. It is after this that the weapons were pre-stocked. Second round means all of this happened in December. After this, weapons were pre-stocked in sensitive localities and the bombings were planned. The plot was simple. Stay with me. The plot was simple. The bombings will again unleash angry Hindu hordes because bombings will target Hindus and a lot of Hindus will die and a lot of Hindus in prominent, well-to-do areas will die, like the stock market, like the jewelry bazaar, Zaveri bazaar, etc. They will then be angry and that will unleash a Hindu fury and angry Hindu hordes will now come out escorted by a partisan Bombay police, and they will be greeted by Muslims now in self-defense armed with AK-47s and grenades, leading to mayhem of the kind never imagined. And then the fires will spread all over India. This is what I meant when I said that these weapons were meant for self-defense, but not not meant for self-defense in the sense that you would normally imagine. This was self-defense if the bombings, as was planned, if the bombings resulted in Hindus, mobs of Hindus, angry Hindus, helped along by Bombay police, attacking Muslim localities, they will be armed people there, armed with automatics. Bombay police then did not have even one AK-47 category weapon, and they'll fire back and kill maybe hundreds of Hindus and God knows how many policemen, and then riots and violence will spread all over India. All memories are selective. Mine too. That's why I have to keep going back to archives. All memories are selective and sometimes convenient, particularly as they go back more than 3 decades. So I not only read up our April 1993 stories in India Today's archives, but also spoke again to some of the key figures in that giant investigation. Some shall remain anonymous, particularly those continuing in service or concerned about underworld reprisals. But M.N. Singh, who led the investigation then as Joint Commissioner Crime, and whom you often see now as a sensible TV talking head, he recalls what a horror Bombay had saved itself from simply by not responding the way the masterminds had expected, reviving the cycle of reprisals. So there were no Hindu hordes coming out now to seek reprisals. I do remember meeting M.N. Singh in his police housing cooperative apartment on Worli Sea Face in 1993 and first hearing the stories of the Mathadis with throat slit. One of my key colleagues was skeptical of this, and so I checked again with Singh's then boss and Maharashtra DGP S. Ramamurthy, whom I had known earlier as an IB veteran. He was more familiar with the methods of organizations like the ISI and vouched for the story his officers were putting together. And how did his police crack the case within 2 days? Alongside the blasts, one band of gangsters had been driving to the BMC headquarters at Victoria Terminus in a car loaded with AKs and grenades, alongside the serial Bombay blasts. It just so happened that the Century Bazaar bomb, the biggest of all, went off while they were thereabouts, still crossing Worli. They fled in panic, abandoning the car. This car was found along with 7 AK rifles and grenades and was registered in the name of the Memon, Tiger and Yaqub Memons, their family, and the case was cracked. And why was the car headed for BMC headquarters? M.N. Singh told me now the gangsters were headed there to break in and fire indiscriminately to kill as many cooperators, many of them from the Shiv Sena, as many cooperators as possible. And this happened, remember, 15 years before 2611. Kill as many cooperators as possible. The blasts, the massacre of cooperators, and then the large-scale killings of Hindu Shiv Sainik reprisal seekers, revenge seekers, and policemen by those using AKs and grenades already positioned. You get the picture. M.N. Singh has one regret even today, and I quote from what he had said. It's a published quote. Arms were delivered to Sanjay Dutt on January 16. Instead of concealing them, if he had only told his father, who in turn would have surely informed the police, he was a good man, Sunil Dutt, who in turn would have surely informed the police, we would have been able to prevent the bombings and save so many lives. You read this and understand why those like me who followed and understood this grand design from close had no sympathy for Yaqub Memon. If the death penalty is to be given in the rarest of rare cases, he deserved it because his complicity killed 257, but could have killed thousands more or tens of thousands more, could have led to an India-Pakistan war. It was such a diabolical plot. You also understand now why M.N. Singh and his many colleagues see the bombings of 1993 as an essentially failed operation. It killed many people but failed in its strategic objective. Singh told me in 1993, Bombay police did not have even one AK-47 rifle then, had never seen a grenade blow up, and even he did not know something called RDX. In the aftermath, his police recovered, hold your breath, in the aftermath, his police recovered 71 AK-47 rifles and 500 grenades dispersed strategically in mixed localities. We knew what mayhem just 9 AKs cost in 2611. What would 71 have done in 1993, he asked. In addition, there were 3.5 tons of RDX and 1,000 200 detonators. I also called Ramamurthy, who was the boss of Bombay Police in 1993, the former IB officer. I called him on the 20th anniversary of the bombings in 2013. He still lived in the same modest flat, modest for a state police chief, his own personal apartment, tiny personal apartment in the narrow Sohrab Bharucha road off Kolaba Causeway, where I had met him in the late March 1993, and he only said, and I quote, "See this Bombay police, good, bad, ugly, whatever you call it. It has cracked every single case of terror attacks so far, and so fast. Something works for it. However bad you might think Bombay police is, something works for it." Very proud of his police. Not only was it the ISI's first major operation in mainland India, it was also the most audacious to date. Much more ambitious than even 26/11. So ambitious and so audacious, in fact, that they risked their most important asset in India, Dawood Ibrahim and his underworld army. They would have known that irrespective of how this ended, they would have had to evacuate the whole lot, Dawood Ibrahim and the rest. Chota Shakil, Dawood Ibrahim, the entire Memon family, everybody, and find them safe harbor in their own country. Now you know why they pamper and protect Dawood and Tiger Memon the way they do. He was key to their most sinister and brutal conspiracy in India to date. To date, I say now, even now. Much more sinister than 26/11. 26/11 was just about killings and maybe triggering a response from India leading to a conflagration. This was designed to create nationwide communal riots that nobody will be able to control. Also, they know simply too much. In the many rounds of bombing since then, many in Mumbai, and even 26/11, you cannot miss this common pattern. Multiple bombings or attacks, but hit one key point in South Bombay first. Get the government distracted there, because South Bombay is where everybody's focus shifts, because South Bombay is so elite and so important. Also, it's also the seat of Maharashtra government. Hit one target in South Bombay first, get the government distracted there, and then have trouble radiate outwards from there. So hit in South Mumbai and then have trouble radiate outwards from there. Even in 26/11, a bomb was left in two taxis timed to go off after a while to cause confusion in entirely different areas. What does this tell you? Except that instruments and methods may have changed in decades, but the masterminds continue to work in the same formula. Do a big thing in one place, get a city's police distracted in 50 different areas in a very complex and crowded city, so they cannot focus and concentrate anywhere where your people are actually operating. I had one long and partly on-record conversation on the phone with Dawood Ibrahim before the blast, set up through my colleague Sheila Bhatt, who edited the Gujarati edition of India Today and was a veteran of the underworld beat in Bombay. That is something that I spoke about in some detail in my Katta Clutter on gold smuggling just last week. This was in 1992, just after Dr. Manmohan Singh had freed up gold imports in India. Those details you will find in that episode, of which I will share a link with you, so I will not repeat it here. The only correction I will give you to what I said in that Katta Clutter on gold is that the conversation then I said took place on March 12, 1992, actually took place on March 10, 1992. March 12, 1992, India lost to New Zealand, but the conversation took place on the day India had lost to West Indies in the same World Cup on March 10, 1992. So I had that date wrong only by 2 days. I am rectifying that now. India were then walloped by the West Indies by 5 wickets at Wellington. He said at that time, Dawood Ibrahim said at that time, anytime I wanted a proper interview, a more proper interview, I only had to let him know and he'll be available. He spoke to Sheila Bhatt again after the bombings, and that interview was published, or story based on that interview was published alongside my story in India Today on 15th of April 1993. I will see if you can find a screenshot from the archives. And he said he was being victimized by Bombay police. He had done nothing wrong. He fulminated, however, over how badly Muslims were targeted in Bombay riots, how their women had been humiliated and children burnt, but denied any role in the serial bombings whatsoever. If the government set up an inquiry, he said, consisting of RAW and CBI in Delhi, but excluding Bombay police, who he claimed had animus against him, he would even present himself before it. I now decided to take him up on an earlier offer of a more proper interview and called him. He said he couldn't promise that right now, but after some cajoling, he agreed to see me if I came to Dubai, though only if I agreed to keep the meeting off the record, unless he agreed specifically to come on record. I did visit Dubai in the first week of April 1993 and presented myself at his workplace, the 17-story Pearl building housing many airline offices then in the buzzing Al Fahidi street, a kind of subcontinental shopping paradise then. Dubai was very different in 1993 from what it is now. Dawood and his brother Anis were in their 12th floor office, decorated with gold inlaid paintings of Ajmer Sharif and Quranic verses. It was just around noon, but I was struck by the fact that that morning's Times of India, Bombay edition, lay on his table. The Dawn stayed in touch. He was in the news then, and of course, all references to him and Dubai in the front page story had been blackened out by Dubai censors. Dawood was not willing to give an interview then, not even to acknowledge that he was in Dubai. When we do the interview, bhai, he said very nicely, and I continue the quote, "You won't come to Dubai just like this." He said he would call me again, and then my car will go and receive you at the tarmac at the airport and bring you in like a VIP. You will be my guest, and my people will also take you shopping, etc., etc. But for now, he said, please do not even mention that you met me here, as it creates problems for my host. I persisted, nagged, and talked around him, and all he would concede was that I mentioned I visited his office without quoting any conversations. And then, as I turned around to leave, making no secret of my dismay and even reluctance and disappointment, what will I go and tell my employer and my editor that they gave me a ticket to travel to Dubai and I'm not coming with an interview? I said I'm going to meet Dawood Ibrahim. I'm not coming back with nothing on the record. Imagine how bad a reporter feels at that. Looking at my disappointment and my body language, he sensed something. "Eh bhai," he said, as I turned around, hoping somehow that he had changed his mind. Now he will talk. "Dekhna bhai," he said, "likhna nahi main jo kaha, huh? See brother, do not repeat what I said. Dekho na, acha nahi hoga. See, it won't be nice." I felt as if the temperature had suddenly dropped 30 degrees below zero, and yet I was sweating on the forehead. That memory isn't selective, nor is it convenient, and it hasn't faded even one bit after 32 years now.